So, yeah, then welcome to this afternoon session. We're here at the Agro biodiversity session. And my name is Ingo Grass. I'm from University of Hohenheim. The pleasure here to host this session with you today. We got 5 talks from very different disciplines, as you will see. Lots of interesting information on biodiversity, agro-biodiversity, and agricultural systems here. And I will directly head over to our first speaker today, who is Pedro Pardo. And Pedro is from the University in Guatemala, and he will talk about home garden structure dynamics in communities of a wetland conservation area in Guatemala. And Pedro, we are looking forward to your presentation and also for a lively discussion afterwards. As you know, please use the Woover app for discussion, for asking questions to our presenters, so we can ask them here also directly in the session. Thank you.
So good afternoon. Thanks a lot for the warm presentation. As you already mentioned, I work at in Guatemala in the National University, and I'm going to present to you this research that was held since 2011 and at the first phase and the second phase in 2018 regarding the home garden structure dynamics in communities of a wetland conservation area in the Pacific coast of Guatemala. This is a brief outline. And let me introduce you to the where is located this conservation area, which is located in the Pacific coast of the country of Guatemala, and is under the management. This protected area is under the management of the National University, where I am currently working. It's a multi-purpose natural reserve because it has different use categories. We combine the nature protection with urban activities or also agricultural activities. In 2,800 hectares, there are 5 communities living there, which approximately add 10,000 inhabitants. And there are different ecosystems which are protected. Among them is the dune and beach ecosystem, mangrove ecosystem, and tular ecosystem, among other ecosystems, which are also being protected there with local activities, commercial activities. There are also touristic activities because there is also a lot of marine turtle release in the area. So in the last few years, we have a lot of tourist income in the area. So the first objective in 2011 was to assess this socio-environmental dynamics associated with the protected area by social cartography and stakeholder mapping, because we have to acknowledge that not only the nature is being protected in this area, there are also a lot of human activities, social activities in the area. There are also a lot of conflicts. Like a few years ago, there was this threat by mining in the sands of the Pacific coast of Guatemala. So all the communities were also gathered there and were expressing their opinions in a very eagerly way. In this first stage, this phase of the research, we were able to meet with different elders of the community, which were, some of them were the first inhabitants in the area. In this opportunity, we have we gather a lot of information regarding the use of the resources, how the different ecosystems were, the quality of the ecosystems, and how they were able to manage and to have some ways to have access to these different resources by medicinal plants and also edible plants. So by social cartography, we were able to track and to have this type of results where in some cases it were some discrepancies with the mapping done by the biologists or by the manager of the area, but with the way that the people see this local and the territory. We were also able to map all the stakeholders in the area to see if there were some conflicts or some ways to have agreements among the stakeholders. And the second objective was to make a ethnobotanical survey where I centered, where I work in home gardens of the 5 communities of this wetland conservation area. In the interview with elders, park rangers, because the park rangers are also part of the communities. They are local park rangers that had this double key role as a social stakeholder, but also as in charge of the protection of the nature in the area. We are also able to collect many medicinal and edible plants in these home gardens and in some natural areas. And the main findings were that we conducted 101 semi-structural interviews and also collection of these plant samples. In 60 home gardens we were able to visit, and we can see by the red dots all the places that we were able to visit in these 5 communities. And as we see in the map, the communities are, some of them are very near by the mangrove ecosystems, which are flooded in the most of the time. And we were able to identify 181 species belonging to 54 botanical families. Most of these families are associated with salinity or are resistant to salinity, to soil, sandy type of soil. So these are plants that are, most of them are medicinal. 90 of these plants are medicinal. And we also see these, there are some edible plants and some other plants that combine both uses. 50 of them, they are also medicinal and edible at the same time. And this is quite logical because these communities were isolated for a long time, so they needed to have and to grow near them all these medicinal plants, because for them it was quite difficult to have access to medicines, to doctors even. So they were quite autosufficient in most of the time. 60% of the plants were native, other were introduced plants, but many of varieties, local varieties have developed in this area due to the isolation. Among the main uses for medicine are diseases, stomach-related problems, or malaria, which was a very frequent illness for the last century in this area. We were able to register some medicinal and ecologically important species, plants that protect soil from erosion in dune ecosystems, which are also disappearing quite fast because, as we already know, this area is quite touristic. So many of the properties that are near the beach in these dune ecosystems are disappearing. There are a lot of hotels and restaurants are being constructed in the area. So this ecosystem is currently under a lot of pressure. There are also threats to the ethnobotanical diversity of the area. This area is under a lot of floodings and inundation susceptibility, especially now with these extreme weather events that have become quite frequent. And this is also threatening a lot the communities, but also the plants that are growing in these home gardens. As we see here in the left, we have this flooded area, and on the right we have the same the home garden, which is completely all the plants that were shrubs or herbs are completely gone because they were drowned by the flooding. So this is making a lot of simplification, a lot of cutting the biodiversity, the agro biodiversity in these home gardens. Only the strong and resistant plants or the tall palms are able to resist and to endure these type of floodings. Also, we have the land use change in the multipurpose nature reserve, which, as we see in the left and in the right image, we see that in the area that the category where the urban use is being done, there are the growing of constructions there, and this means that all the home gardens that usually had a huge area for developing these home gardens, now they are being reduced, and a lot of these home gardens have to be turned down in order to construct and to make way for other construction, or also the increase on the family size. So a gradual loss of the knowledge and traditional use of local flora by the communities was evidenced, and considering that home gardens function as reservoirs of useful plants and the traditional knowledge associated with this, in 2018 we did a follow-up assessment, which focused in 31 of the 62 original home gardens that we assessed in 2011. So this second objective was to, third objective was to determine the composition, the structure, and the spatial arrangement of plants in home gardens, and also to assess the ecological importance of these home gardens in terms of the capacity to provide food and niche for birds and bat species. So we wanted also to highlight the ecological importance that these home gardens were doing in the nature protection of the area. We measure by doing interviews to the owners of the home gardens. We also measure the diameter, the height of the trees in order to establish this structure and composition and spatial arrangement of plants in home gardens. We were able to register that at least these home gardens are keeping 25 species of medicinal plants or more, and 30 species of edible plants or more in this home garden. So in some cases, they even have 50 in an ensemble of different use types, even as a wood species.
Pedro,
And
you have about 2 minutes remaining, just so you know.
Thanks a lot. As we see in this area, we also were able to track the ecological importance of home gardens by registering birds in these areas, and also by collecting some bats by mist nets. So we have this species list of these groups in order to show the people the importance of that home gardens. Other findings regarding the home gardens of the area were that there were important changes in home garden structure. We see this simplification of the home gardens. Most of the herbs and shrubs disappear. Most of the people taking care of this home garden died also because they were elders, they were old people. This knowledge is not being taken too much by the young generation. And most of the changes are related to size reduction and species diversity loss. In general terms, a simplification in home garden structure in the area is evident, and this can have a long-term consequences in terms of food security and family economy, since some of the fruits produced complement the family income. We were able to cope with these problems. We wanted to establish the basis to design a demonstration garden in the conservation area visitor centers, because home gardens have to be seen as a means to educate the new generation, as well as contributing to the in situ conservation of the ethnobotanical diversity. We also made a catalog of medicinal and edible plants to the area that were given to the people. We produced these different posters to also highlight the importance in terms of the birds and the bats and different ecological importance of the home gardens, and a calendar in order to make and to develop all this knowledge in the young generation that are mainly focusing in the touristic industry and leaving all this traditional knowledge that is being lost. I would like to thank for your attention and some acknowledgement to the National Research Direction of the University of San Carlos. And I am open for your questions. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Pedro, for the very, very nice presentation and taking us to Guatemala and showing these nice pictures and impressions. I found this very, very interesting. And of course, it's very unfortunate to see these home gardens in decline. I'm not seeing questions on the Woover app yet, so all the listeners out there, please be reminded to ask your questions in the session Q&A on Woover. But I may also pose a short question to you, Pedro. So you also highlighted several times in your talk that it's mainly elderly people who still use these home gardens and the younger generation giving up slowly. And yeah, in the last sentences you said this is mainly about the young people going into the tourist industry. And so how can we reach these young people? Could we maybe even think about going into schools, or maybe even directly targeting young generations, even more direct than with your already nice outreach material, to keep them interested in maintaining biodiversity?
Yeah, indeed. That's why we try to work with the park rangers that are the nexus between the central management and the local management and the communities, to reach these schools and to have this home garden demonstration, home garden at the visitor centers. So the kids from the school and also the people from the community are able to even find out about this species that they didn't even know. Only the old people are able to recognize them, but the young people didn't. So it was quite a surprise to see that many of these youngsters were able to they have this element of surprise when they were able to see that this plant that was always growing there is of medicinal use or of edible use.
Cool. Okay. And one final quick question from Leonard, just as a percentage, roughly, how many of these plants in these home gardens are planted, and how many of these are just occurring because of natural dynamics? So as a percentage, what would you say as a rough guess?
Yeah, in this area, most of the plants are planted there, but 60% are natural. They are native of the area. What happens is that you need a lot of input, a lot of investment of time and resources in order for these plants to grow, because of these problems with the floodings, and also there is a lot of salinity. So the people really need to have some time to for the plants to endure. Otherwise, they will not last just the rainy season, for example.
Okay, thanks a lot, Pedro. Yeah, thanks a lot again. Very nice presentation. If there are other questions coming up, please directly target them to Pedro. And I'm sure he will also follow the Q&A on Wova to answer all your questions that may still come up. Then we continue with Lennart Janssen, actually. And Lennart will give a talk actually from the paleotropics, I suppose, because it's about baobabs. And baobabs being used as, first of all, with a focus on root tuber development, but also on the yield potential. And he and his colleagues studied this in Malawi, and we're looking forward to your presentation, Lennart. And I think this will actually be a video presentation because Lennart is already now in a very remote place, but he will still be able to answer your questions. So please, to the technicians, could you please start the video presentation? Thank you.
Hello and welcome to my presentation as part of the Agro biodiversity session at Tropentag 2020. This presentation deals with the root tuber and leaf number development of Baobab seedlings in Malawi. And this study was conducted as part of the Bioquality project in 2019. The Bioquality project is international, interdisciplinary research and development effort to increase the value and quality of the baobab processing sector in different countries, as well as cultivation and product qualities. It encompasses multiple partners like research institutions, but also non-governmental organizations, as well as private entities that try to create and sell baobab products globally. And this has also been published as a paper in the Journal of Agriculture and Rural Development in the Tropics and Subtropics, or JARTS. And the root tuber is what we think today a survival organ. It's very water rich, very juicy, so it has a very thin rind or skin. Hello and welcome to my presentation as part of the Agro biodiversity session at Tropentag 2020. This presentation deals with the root tuber and leaf number development of Baobab seedlings in Malawi. And this study was conducted as part of the Bioquality project in 2019. The Bioquality project is an international, interdisciplinary research and development effort to increase the value and quality of the Baobab processing sector in different countries, as well as cultivation and product qualities. It encompasses multiple partners like research institutions, but also non-governmental organizations, as well as private entities that try to create and sell Baobab products globally. And this has also been published as a paper in the Journal of Agriculture and Rural Development in the Tropics and Subtropics, or JARTS. And the root tuber is what we think today a survival organ. It's very water rich, very juicy, so it has a very thin rind or skin, and most of it's a storage organ for water, especially before the Baobab seedlings develop the typical stem succulents we associate with the bottle-shaped tree. They store most of their water in the first year or months in this root tuber, which usually has a carrot shape, but it can look very morphologically variable, which you will see later. So we used 5 provenances from Malawi and 3 treatments. Provenances you can see here. They are from ecophysiologically more or less different locations. So a lot more, some are subhumid like here, and some are semi-arid like these ones. And the treatment was the planting distance. We used 10, 20 and 30 centimeters. And we have 2 trials, one in Mangochi, so here, and one in Mzuzu, which is a lot higher and a lot more humid, but also colder. The measured plant parameters included the root length, the root dry mass, and the tuber diameter for the root tuber development, the shoot length, the number of developed leaves, and the shoot dry mass for the shoot development. And the yield potential we calculated using the mean relative growth rates from the measured plant parameters over time, as well as the root shoot ratio and percent dry mass to give you an idea how these things are built or constructed or constituted. So the Mzuzu study site looked like this. We created ridges with 3 replications per provenance and planting distance combinations. We had 5 harvests total over 18 weeks. We planned to have much more, but due to bad weather and unfortunately also pathogen or fungal infections of the seedlings, we had to scale those back a lot and conclude the experiment at least in Mzuzu prematurely. So you see the weather was quite cold, down to 5 degrees during the cold dry season in Malawi in July. And the germination percentages as well were quite low, even for certain provenances as low as 16%, with a plot average of 30%. So it's below expectations, even though we pre-treated them properly according to advice they are given by local experts. The root tubers in Mzuzu were quite small. You see the carrot shape already, but it's more or less still focused on fibrous roots. And if you see the scale, there's the length of a finger, more or less, like your index finger. The development in the root fresh mass, you see this box plot here, we barely move on averages above 2 grams, with outliers reaching 7 grams as above. It's very little. This also is visible in the mean relative growth rates, which you see are given in per mil per day of the size of the weight of the measured plant parts, and negative for shoot length and shoot dry mass because we had necrosis of leaves and leaf abscission, but also for tuber diameter and root dry mass for some treatments, and root length, which indicates that the root was used up, or the resources stored in the root were used up by the seedling for survival rather than growth. The results of Mangochi were a lot more interesting because there the climate was much warmer. We had a longer harvest or growth period and more harvests. You see the minimal temperatures reached here don't go below 15 degrees very much, and higher temperatures are in the upper 30s at the end, which is around here starts the hot dry season. The irrigation was much lower, and we had to irrigate, the precipitation was much lower, and we had to irrigate much more. And the final germination percentage in Mangochi were sadly similar to them and those in Zuzu, with similar issues of seed rot, for example. But there we see some differences in provenances. So yeah, the provenances, Salima, for example, was performing much worse here in Mangochi than in Zuzu, and the other way around for Karonga, which performed much better here than Zuzu. We have sadly no idea why. Now, this is what the growth or cultivation look like. We have very vigorous growth for most of the seedlings, but in the end, after four months, we encountered signs of moisture stress or water stress. So the cotyledons abscisse, this was pretty typical from the plant, but you see here dried out leaves, and the apical meristem growth is quite stunted in a way. The root tubers in Mangochi were though much larger. You see the scale is very small, so typical length here is 30 centimeters, and these are of course selected examples, but you get the picture. It's carrot-like, yam tuber-like even, and the development in this graph you see is positive, leveling off after the 5th harvest, with outliers reaching 200 and 180 grams and above. And the scale would have not fit, so we just mention it here. And the main relative growth rates were pretty positive for most parameters, except this one here, which is slightly negative, but the large standard deviations of the number of developed leaves seem to indicate a lot of variability. And maybe this is also a sign of moisture stress. The root length was generally positive, especially for the 30 centimeter treatments, and the root dry mass as well. And you'll see this is an upper level. It's at the lower edge of things, of root growth rates typical for woody species, which are of 30 to 100 per mil per day. And they're even significantly different, but I'll talk about that after this slide. So the root-shoot ratio was below 1 after 2 months, and then increased further and further, even though you have a large spread of values here to 3 to 4 even. So the seedlings invested mainly into the root in the first few months, which was an important confirmation of previous studies. And the percent dry mass hovered around 10%, 12%. We can't really extrapolate much from this graph. There's too much data, too much noise. But it seems that this is a typical value to expect for a water storing organ. Pictures of the roots look like this. This is a picture of the researcher's finger below, next to the root, so we have an idea of the scale. And here we did the scale, so this is a rather small one yet, but after 4 months you see that we have very impressive specimens here, even going as big as this one. This is the outlier of 230 grams you saw a few slides ago. Didn't even fit into the sheet of paper where we would dry them in, and it took a long time to dry, which was not easy because they were prone to rotting if they weren't hot enough during drying. Now the effect of provenance, we were not visible in the data. We saw no significant differences between provenances for all plant parameters measured. This could be due to the small harvesting or growth period, that Baobab seedlings do not really develop provenance individual morphologies until 18 to 20 weeks of age, so that's the maximum cutoff for the Mangochi experiment. Planting distance did have an effect if you paid attention to this growth rate table a few slides ago. For root length, root dry mass, and the number of developed leaves. So this is influenced by how dense you plant them, which could be explained by competition for soil resources, or especially water. Not so much light, because the seedlings were too small to really grow into each other's light field. And you see that even the differences here are not that extreme, but if you extrapolate these differences over time using an interest rate formula and these starting conditions, you get a quite stark difference. And this would result in around 30 grams more root fresh mass, and plus minus 2 leaves, which is not very agronomically significant for a farmer. But if you extrapolate this again to a hectare, this is around interestingly now that the 10 centimeter treatment gives you higher yield of yields and tubers due to the denser planting, which is logical, but it also comes with a drawback, and that would be increased material depreciation and family labor costs, because you have to plant 3 times as many plants, especially in the agricultural peak season when you labor competes with other crops and Baobab is something new or unsure or not tested. You have to be really convincing for this. So the time investment is higher for 10 centimeter treatments, the costs are higher, and the profits is only marginally higher, of 70 cents more over harvest period. And yeah, that are the basic results, the main results of my study. Thank you for your attention. We also created an instruction manual for Baobab cultivation after the study as a part of the bioquality project, which is, I think, available online. If you want to message me on Hoover, I could try to give you more information, but I'm already over time. So this is a picture of the researchers. I'm on the left, Ms. Hansson is on the right. We are holding root tubers, and I thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much, Leonard, for this very, very nice video presentation of your research work. Very interesting to see, also very innovative, I think.
Thank you.
Honestly, thanks a lot. Honestly, I was not fully aware that actually baobabs can be farmed in this kind of manner also for smallholders, actually. And maybe if you could briefly point out, what are the main smallholders that you would target with this kind of crop? Yeah, so would this be, as you say, there may be trade-offs with other kinds of crops, or sometimes you need to irrigate a lot. So what would be the ideal smallholder situation for growing baobabs?
The motivation for growing baobabs instead of just harvesting the fruits from the mature trees is that the trees the populations of baobab, especially Malawi, are aging, and most of the trees are diseased or sick, so they are easily overexploited. So that easily happens that during the peak demand season, baobab traders, because usually only the pulp of the fruit is consumed, made into juice or ice, they import fruits from Mozambique and Zimbabwe, because Malawi itself can't support this demand anymore. And this is especially true now that the baobab is legalized as a food ingredient in the European Union and the US, so demand is expected to increase, and the natural stands cannot satisfy this. And if we would find a way to valorize seedlings or growing new baobabs as a because if you wait to use the fruits, you wait 20 years and you cannot sell this to a farmer. Nobody would do that. But if you say, hey, we have a lot of seeds left from pulp processing, plant them, you can sell the root tubers as a upmarket vegetable, so it's healthy and it doesn't need a lot of water, because baobab is naturally drought resistant as it grows in very dry areas. And the ideal smallholder farmer who would grow baobab, I don't know, doesn't really exist. I think it should be attractive to all the smallholder farmers, especially because many of them already rely on monoculture of maize. And if you could diversify the portfolio, be it baobab, be it yam, be it something local else, what's a good example here? I only know the local names, but there's a lot of alternatives, and if we can create some recognition for baobab as an opportunity, as an alternative, you can do this, then we thought it's definitely worth trying to demonstrate this. And yes, we got a lot of weird looks for our trial plots there, because they had also never seen it done before.
Well, thanks a lot for these nice explanations. I mean, I find it very convincing, and it seems to be a great way to diversify your farm portfolio, and especially, of course, with these new markets emerging in the US, in Europe, for these fancy food ingredients. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and hopefully smallholders may also profit from this in terms of generating more income for themselves. So thanks a lot for that.
No problem.
Presentation. We're already short on time, so I would hand over then to our next presenter, who is Isabella Stachowicz from University of Łódź in Poland. And Isabella will talk about the question, is the forest half full or half empty? And this is about bushmeat, and a very timely and interesting topic. And we're looking forward to your presentation, Isabella.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
So yes, yeah, we can see your PowerPoint.
Can you, yeah, can you
Just
see?
make it full screen right now. Yes, now it's full screen. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you very much for making all these efforts to meet, however, virtually. I'm happy to participate with this kind of different presentation as I see in this session, because we will really focus on mammals, on fauna, than much more than on vegetation. However, in terms of gardens, home gardens, Sweden gardens, or conucos, as we call it in South America, I think I would like to share with you important findings from our studies. Currently, I'm working in University of Łódź in Poland, but I'm also a postdoc in Venezuela at the Instituto Venezolano de Investigaciones Científicas. And this work was, the study was carried out also by José Rafael Ferrer Paris and Ada Sanchez Mercado from Venezuela, but they're currently in Australia. So hunting by indigenous, inhabitants of forest, tropical forest, has increased in recent years due to human population growth, easier access to undisturbed forest, a change in hunting technology, and lack of alternative protein source, and higher demand for bushmeat. Worldwide, more than half of the intact forest and wilderness areas are partially devoid of large mammals and birds, with a significant reduction in their abundance. During this presentation, I will show you the local study from Venezuela exploring the hypothesis of garden hunting and estimating mammals and birds' abundance to establish possible hunting limits. We combined camera trap studies and spatially explicit dataset on indigenous hunting activity in mosaic of savanna and forest. So in 1976, Linares proposed this hypothesis of garden hunting, which states that modification of plant community and in situ care of domesticated plants in a shifting cultivation system may generate favorable conditions for wildlife, resulting in higher abundance of herbivore species. So as a result, disturbed habitats can be richer as natural food resources, both from an animal and a human point of view. So we move to Venezuela. Our study is focused on Pemon indigenous communities. We are not pretty sure when Pemon indigenous came to this part of the world. When some of the studies said that it's around 2,000 years. So they've been changing, modifying the habitat for more or less this period. So they are inhabiting a mosaic of savanna and forest of the Grand Savanna in southeastern Venezuela, highland Amazon as we call it. Their common practice among Pemon communities it's hunting, but they are hunting for subsistence. Because Grand Savanna soils are very poor in nutrients, extensive agriculture and cattle raising activities are not practiced. And Pemon practice shifting cultivation that provides them with vegetables and some fruits. Here we have an example of one of the plants, which is manioc, that is one of the most common, and it's growing kind of good in this kind of poor soils, and they produce manioc, then they produce cassava, which is the primary source of alimentation for this group of people. And they obtain protein through fishing and hunting with different frequency, while they have cultural taboos prohibiting hunting of certain wildlife like foxes, anteaters, or felids, and some preferences like tapirs, deers, peccaries. Additionally, new religion restriction has emerged recently, colliding with traditional customs. So we focused on two questions: how much do hunting activity, conuco presence, which is the Sweden garden, and forest cover affect wildlife occurrence? Does current hunting pattern of preferred prey and hunting habitat reflect prey availability? So here you can see the map of the study area that was divided in 6 blocks of 50 kilometer squares, and then the blocks was divided in cells. Here we can see where the camera traps were located, and also we asked the members of the community to tell us where hunting activity is actually going on, or where they used to hunt. So thanks to this information, we obtained this image of spatial distribution on activity depending on the habitat. We use camera traps, we use tracks and interviews to collect information on mammals, and we obtain pictures and videos as well as tracks. With all this data, we fitted occupancy models for mammals and birds. Then to obtain information about preferences of hunting, there was this direct semi-structured interview technique practicing for communities, and we established 2 indices: importance of hunting and hunting preference, to investigate which species they prefer to hunt and which species are the most important to hunt for these communities in Grand Savannah. So thanks to camera traps, with the sampling effort of more than 4,500 camera days, we obtained information about 30 species of mammals, 7 species of carnivores, and 16 species of birds. So it turned out that human activity in study area, represented by conuco presence and hunting pressure, does not limit a mammal's richness, which might be surprising. Blocks with intermediate presence of conucos that you can see in the middle and hunting activity were characterized by intermediate species richness, while blocks with highest hunting pressure had the highest species richness that we have here on the top. Block with highest presence of conuco and limited hunting pressure was second in terms of species richness. In terms of preferences of habitat, forest was the preferred hunting area for the majority of interviews, followed by savanna. You can see here that there were 17 peoples. In general, there were 29 people participating in the interviews. It's not that easy to convince indigenous people to participate in interviews. Especially there was sometimes a language barrier. However, I speak Spanish, especially women in communities, they don't speak Spanish, they speak Arecuna, so we needed the translator to help us to obtain information. And we didn't see the difference between the 4 communities in terms of preference of habitat, and in terms of season, the majority of interviews handled during the rainy season, between May and August, while only 20% interviews hand all year round. Here as well, we haven't seen the difference between the communities. Here we apply the Chi test. Here, without big surprise, the most of species are significantly related with forest cover. These marked green are 3 species, agouti, tapir and red brocket, that have positive relationship with forest and are statistically significant, while the crab-eating fox, here marked as a red point at the bottom of the graphic, is the only species that is significantly, statistically significantly related to savanna and preferred this habitat. In terms of shifting cultivation, we use the distance from the conuco, from the camera trap where the species was captured by camera, to the distance to the closest conuco. So we find out that 2 species, which is again the agouti and red brocket, has the preference to appear closer to Conucos. And in this, it results that our hypothesis of garden hunting is here, fortunately, confirmed, well, at least partially. Well, in terms of a preference of prey, these three species were the most important species to be hunted, which is tapir, paca, and wild-tailed deer. The most preferred species was white-tailed deer. But in terms of abundance, and this is very important, the wild-tailed deer is the one with the lowest abundance in the study area, while paca is one with the highest. 80% of them prefer to hunt with shotguns. However, this is a big limitation right now because there's lack of ammunition, and which is interesting, Pemon community is going back to the very traditional way of hunting, which is, as you can see in the picture, with I just forget the name in English, but you can see it on the picture. Okay, so to get to conclusion, our finding correspond with garden hunting hypothesis. Occurrence of herbivorous species was higher in blocks with higher number of conucos. Vicinity of conucos was significantly associated with occurrence of lowland paca and gray brocket. Current scheme of resources used did not generate devastating hunting-induced defaunation, and we can sometimes hear from the publication, maybe only in terms of one species, which is white-tailed deer, but it's not endangered species. What is very important to mention is that the lack of transparency in subsistence hunting regulation spreads over the Amazon's region, leaving indigenous and indigenous communities in limbo. We need to update coherent legislation regulation of fauna. Fauna use is very needed, that requires culturally appropriate, politically realistic and pragmatic action, and also detailed social, spatially accurate data if we want to have to be effective on this local scale. And the very last thing is that large-scale analysis of hunting rates might overlook the factors operating locally, like landscape type of matrix, wildlife diversity, cultural hunting taboos, religion, type of protein source, hunting technology, economic context, and emerging threats leading to misinterpretation and incorrect management decision. And in this moment, I would like to mention this huge mining project in Venezuela, which is the size of Portugal, that is going on right now. So we would like to propose using this kind of small studies that are common in South America and in Africa, and sometimes we cannot publish that information on a wide scale, but we have this local information and knowledge of local context to apply kind of indices like maximum sustainable offtake that quantitatively combine the supply and demand for wildlife resources. So thank you very much for your attention. And here's contact to me, and I'm waiting for your questions.
Thanks a lot, Isabella. Thanks a lot for bringing also the mammals to the session. You're absolutely right. We also need more talks, not only on plants, but also on animals. This was very stimulating. And we are a bit short on time, but nonetheless, I would like to ask a very brief question. It's a very interesting finding that the hunting pressure that correlate positively with the species richness. So is this really, say, something with cause and effect, or is it more that maybe hunters also prefer to go where the animals are, so that, where there are lots of animal species, also that you can have a higher hunting pressure, or how would you see these correlations?
Well, it results that these species that they prefer to hunt, which is a white-tailed deer, the species habitat is savanna, it's not forest. And they are actually aware that this, in my study area, they finish with the population. It's very rare to see these species. It's very, for them, it's kind of logical. It's a big piece of meat. So it's much easier to see this kind of species on the savanna when you have a good view than to follow them in the forest. This is why we can see the high abundance of species like agouti or paca in the forest, and it's easier to hunt them in their habitat. So this is why paca is the second most hunted or most preferred species for them to hunt. So it's not such a clear a pattern of preference of habitat, because the preferred prey is a deer and is related to savanna. But as they know, it's getting more and more reduced in abundance. They prefer to go to the forest, where they have like a higher probability of success to hunt.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, thanks a lot for the nice explanation. So thanks a lot for this great talk. Yeah, I would then directly give over to the next presentation. And as a reminder to our listeners, please ask your questions on the Wova app in the Q&A section. I then hand over to Lukas Klieve. And Lukas actually will take us to another place in the tropics, actually to Malaysia, because he's doing studies on monoculture and agroforestry palm oil production systems. And Lukas, I believe we have also a video, but you may also give your presentation directly now by sharing your screen. So please let us know how you would like to proceed.
Hey, can you hear me?
You're very, very quiet. It's very hard to hear you.
Yeah, I think I don't have...
I'm sorry, I can barely hear your voice, but not your words.
Okay, wait a second.
Okay, I believe we proceed with the video because of the technical issues, and then, yeah.
Hey, can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's slightly better, yeah.
I can't hear you, sorry.
Okay, then maybe we proceed
I
with
think
the
it's
video.
better if we use the video, since I don't have the technical measures.
Okay.
Yeah, there seem to be some difficulties, sorry. Hello and welcome everybody to the presentation of our work Sustainability Performance of Independent Smallholders in Sarawak's palm oil sector, which is a comparison of monoculture and agroforestry farming systems. My name is Lukas Klieve. I realized data acquisition for this study as a part of my master's thesis for the graduation of environmental sciences at the University of Cologne, and I will be presenting in the name of the other contributors Rainer Weisheidinger, Lukas Baumgart and Alexander Frohmann. Palm oil constitutes the single most important vegetable oil globally. It accounts for 38% of the world's vegetable oil demand. The high land use efficiency of the oil palm, 3.8 tons per hectare and year, is incomparable with other oil plants, especially European oil plants. 85% of the world demand of palm oil are produced in Malaysia and Indonesia alone. Here, smallholders account for 35 to 40% of the total area of planted oil palm and 33% of the output. These smallholders oftentimes have been forced into industry-conform production modes. Sarawak is the state in Malaysia which accounts for most palm oil area. More than a quarter of the total area allocated for production in Malaysia is located here. This, in fact, makes palm oil a defining part of Sarawak's agricultural landscape. About 70% of agricultural area is allocated for oil palms. At the same time, the sustainability issues of palm oil production are regarded with growing concern. These sustainability concerns are manifold and can be broadly divided into environmental and socio-economic sustainability issues. However, they are deeply intertwined and affect each other in a complex manner. The independent smallholders play a vital role in the future development of cultivation systems, as they can sovereignly adapt their cultivation systems, which makes the farm level one of the main leverages for designing a sustainable food system throughout all sustainability dimensions. As pointed out previously, palm oil production in the form of monoculture production in specialized industrial agriculture has been identified to be unsustainable. However, the industry and scientists predict the demand for palm oil to grow further at an estimated annual growth rate of 1.7% until 2050. Therefore, the scientific community increasingly communicates the need to transform agricultural production systems towards more sustainable alternatives, which is acknowledged even by industry players. Throughout this debate on what is the best way to go forward, agroforestry has been identified as a promising candidate to make palm oil cultivation more sustainable. There are many types of agroforestry systems with varying degrees of complexity and uses, as can be seen within the figure on the right-hand side, which shows a categorization of agroforestry based on the nature of its components. Within this study, we evaluated the sustainability performances of smallholders in the palm oil sector in Sarawak and compared the performances of monoculture and agroforestry systems. The method of choice is a holistic sustainability assessment. The FAO published a common framework to assess sustainability in food production in 2014, namely the Sustainability Assessment of Food and Agriculture Systems, or SAFA guidelines. These SAFA guidelines are hierarchically organized into a structure of 4 dimensions: environment, economy, social and governance dimensions, as depicted in the upper picture, 21 themes and 58 objectives, with the hierarchy as depicted in the pyramidal arrangement. For each subtheme, an absolute objective is identified whose achievement equals the target state of sustainability. To apply this sustainability assessment in the field, we used the Sustainability Monitoring and Assessment Routine, or Smart Farm tool. This tool operationalizes the sustainability assessment framework proposed by the SAFA guidelines and considers all constituting dimensions of sustainability as defined by those guidelines. The Smart Farm tool is an indicator-based and multi-criteria tool for sustainability assessment at farm level. It aims at rating the goal achievement of a farm regarding an explicit goal for each of the 58 objectives of the SAFA guidelines based on a set of 327 individual indicators. The database of the study includes assessments of 16 independent smallholdings, 14 independent smallholders cultivating palm oil in monoculture, and 2 smallholders that introduced agroforestry to parts of their plots, one applying biodynamic farming practices and with larger portions of agroforestry on his land, and one applying conventional management practices with agroforestry only a small portion of his land. Although this database is fairly limited, it gives a good impression of the all-over sustainability performance of smallholders in Sarawak's palm oil sector, and indications regarding drawbacks and benefits of agroforestry as compared to monoculture can be derived. We used non-probability sampling. Smallholders were acquired through gatekeepers and using the snowball method. The smallholdings are split into 2 regional clusters, each 8 farms in northern Sarawak and southern Sarawak, one of which is agroforestry smallholder. The farms have an average size of 15 hectares, and many smallholders engage in a broad range of other economic activities and are therefore not solely depending on the income from oil palms. Results indicate that sustainability is lacking to a substantial degree. Goal achievements of most sustainability themes lie between the 21% and 60% marks. The best performances are found regarding water and materials and energy, while the worst performances are found for holistic management and accountability. The agroforestry smallholders perform better in several subthemes. The largest differences in sustainability performances can be found in the environmental integrity and economic resilience dimensions. While agroforestry smallholder 1 performs considerably better in many themes as compared to the average monoculture smallholder, the performance of agroforestry smallholder 2 is less superior. Due to time constraints, emphasis on selected subthemes that exhibit major deficiencies or conspicuous differences in goal achievements is made. Within the good governance dimension, subthemes mission statement, holistic audits, full cost accounting, and transparency show low performances. The monoculture smallholders don't even reach 10% goal achievements. The agroforestry smallholders perform slightly better, with agroforestry smallholder 1 performing better than agroforestry smallholder 2. However, subthemes of the sustainability dimension good governance exhibit the worst goal achievements for both agroforestry and monoculture smallholders compared to the other dimensions. The lack of environmental integrity constitutes one of the main concerns regarding the palm oil sector. Particularly, biodiversity is in the center of concerns of both the scientific community and the general public. The results on the sustainability assessment for the dimension environmental integrity reflect that to a degree. Hotspots are ecosystem diversity and land degradation, which perform worst, while water withdrawals show exceptionally good performance. Most subthemes of agroforestry smallholder 2 exhibit minor differences as they lie within the range of the monoculture smallholder's goal achievements. Agroforestry smallholder 1, on the other hand, performs considerably better. The economic resilience of smallholders that form part of the palm oil sector is another widely expressed key concern. Agroforestry smallholder 1 has better goal achievements throughout all sub-themes of the dimension except for the sub-theme stability of market. However, the performance is within the range of monoculture smallholders' goal achievements. Agroforestry smallholder 2 performs close to the average and in the range of the monoculture smallholders' goal achievement. The comparison reveals that the goal achievements for the sub-themes generally do not differ as much as within the previous dimensions between agroforestry smallholder 2 and the average monoculture smallholder. Within the social dimensions, the comparison of the two respective agroforestry smallholders to the average monoculture smallholder is contested. While for some of the sub-themes, the agroforestry smallholders perform better, they perform towards the low end as compared to the monoculture smallholders average for other sub-themes. Hotspots for all the smallholdings are the sub-themes capacity development, gender equality, and support to vulnerable people. Because of the time constraints, we are presenting only few indicators that are emblematic for the performance of smallholders. The industry-conformed production system has deteriorating effects on natural resources. The agricultural system and practices often do not allow smallholders to appropriately take care of natural resources such as soil. This can be seen emblematically, for example, for the indicators for erosion prevention, which is the box to the left, and indicator erosion control on agricultural area with more than 15% slope, which is on the upper right. They stand emblematic for the fact that natural resources are being deteriorated through the currently used industry-conformed practices, thereby fertility of the land is decreased on the long run. This practice is strongly unsustainable. Another aspect is the potential negative impact on biodiversity stemming from oil palm cultivars. As one example, the indicator areas for promoting biodiversity on the lower right is named. With the agroforestry smallholders being the exception, smallholders do not place valuable landscape elements for interconnection that support biodiversity on their farmland. All of the aforementioned indicators stand emblematic for the consequences that come with the paradigm of efficiency, profit maximization, and industry-conformed production modes. The indicator farm net income, which is depicted on the upper graph, is crucial for the comparison between monoculture and conventional smallholdings. 5 smallholders cover all costs and living wage plus gain profit, 9 smallholders can cover costs and living wage, and 2 smallholders cannot do so. These 2 smallholders appear to be the agroforestry smallholders. As both of the farmers do not primarily depend on the farm income and have further economic assets, they can test a farming system, such as agroforestry, without the need to be as profitable as possible economically. This is a possible explanation for the fact that agroforestry is a niche when it comes to farming systems of smallholdings in the palm oil context. There is no guaranteed profitability in alternative practices, while industry-conforming farming systems have a certain output shown to small farmers by large plantations. Another often cited issue in the palm oil sector is in general, and specifically in Sarawak, are land rights issues. The results of the indicator for land use rights on the lower left reflect on that. Only 12 of 16 smallholders have sufficient land use rights. Finally, I want to point out the indicator for use of protective gear when applying plant protection. As mentioned previously, most of the audited smallholders apply industry-conformed farming practices, which includes the use of pesticides. At the same time, however, there is a considerable lack in sense of responsibility towards workers. More than half of the smallholdings lack protective gear when plant protection is applied. This since emblematic for the labor rights issues many scholars point at and coincides with sustainability concerns expressed by the science and the general public. To wrap up the findings of this study, I want to emphasize on the fact that oil palm smallholders exhibit deficits in sustainability throughout all sustainability dimensions. Agroforestry can potentially improve some of the sustainability issues for palm oil production of independent smallholders, with limitations stemming from the management practices and the type of agroforestry system that is established. Some indicators are emblematic for issues concerning the current production mode as well as its alternatives, including the sustainability performances show that efficiency-driven production mode is unsustainable. At the same time, the farmer needs to invest in order to establish agroforestry systems. This in turn requires economic assets. Limitation of the study include a lack of generalizability of our findings based on the nature of the database and sampling. Further issues is the fact that the long-term viability of the agroforestry system is not a given, since the systems have been established only recently. These are our references we used for the presentation. And if there are questions, if you want to discuss on certain aspects, or if you want to give feedback on the study, we warmly welcome you to contact either one of us. Thank you for your attention. We are looking forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Lucas, for the very nice presentation. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but gladly Lucas prepared this ahead of his presentation here right now. And I asked him a question in between because we're also having audio problems here. So I asked him actually, what kind of trees actually do these agroforestry farmers plant? And he replied that the first farmer is actually intercropping banana, shoria trees, and oil palms on parts of his farmland. Whereas agroforestry farmer number 2, you might remember the one actually who performs also slightly better in some of these indicators, is growing ginger below his oil palm. With no alteration in the standing of the oil palms, so no taking out of different palms. And he also added to this that actually there is also no subsidies whatsoever for the agroforestry system. And personally, also from my experience, I also think this is a big problem that so far there are no certification schemes or subsidy schemes in place which actually promote these kind of more sustainable agroforestry practices. But I think this very nice study by Lucas actually showed how important these could be, and that we definitely need to put more energy into promoting agroforestry also of oil palm and doing research on this very important topic. So once again, thanks a lot, Lucas, for the nice video presentation. You can also ask him more questions in the chat of the Woover app. And with this, I would then like to turn over to the last presentation of our session today. Not without already telling you that there will also be a poster session at 6 o'clock today, later on. But before we come to this, we actually change the topic again a bit. And we turn to a presentation by Annika Tudujani. And Annika will talk about the role of gene banks, which is a I think, very timely topic, and about how gene banks can address and improve the livelihoods of poor farmers. So we're looking forward to your presentation and insights into this very important topic, Annika.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just let me.
Perfect, thanks a lot.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about the role of the Albanian gene bank in addressing and improving the livelihoods of the poorest farmers. Currently, I work at the Institute of Plant and Genetic Resources in the Agricultural University of Tirana, and it has been only 1 year here, and I've been part of this project where I'm going to introduce you about. So I'm going through the presentation. There is the outline of it. It's introduction and the aim of the study. It's a bit of a general description of Albania, the research question, the methodology, the results, policies, and some recommendations. So the introduction and the aim of the study, I'd like to point out that this study was carried out via a project which took place in 2018 and still somehow continues in the Albanian Alps. What we wanted as a research institute is to interfere and to see our potential role. And to be part of this project, it was a bit difficult because, as you may know, Albania is a southeastern European country and part of the Balkans, but you know, the research is quite unlimited with resources, right? So what we wanted to do with the study is to define the role of the gene bank in the process of helping out the poorest farmers in these zones, so in the Albania Alps. We wanted to identify the main challenges that the poorest farmers face in the mountains, and those are quite remote areas, I would say. And in Albania, those are the poorest smallholders. We wanted to understand the role of the agriculture public policies to develop these zones. And via all of the study, we wanted as well to define and assess some policies, how the Alps can be developed and consolidated in accordance with some public agriculture policies. As you may know, Albania is part of the accession in the European Union. So one of the pillars is to develop the agroeconomic and the agriculture, because we are an agriculture country as well. So the research question was, how can the gene bank interfere and improve the situation of the smallholder farmers in the northern Albanian Alps? And so the characteristics of Albania, where the study took place, is this zone here in the northern Alps. The Albania has a variety and quite a morphological conditions, climatic is differently, and it's a small country. It has a remarkable diversity within the landscape that it possesses, and it ranged from some snow-capped mountains to hot and sunny coast of the Adriatic and Ionian Sea. So it's quite the Mediterranean Sea, but the Alps, as I already mentioned, are quite poor. So the data set were the villages that we interfered actually, and they were part actually of GTZ, of the German project, was villages in Tropoja and Shkodra region. So what the Albania Gene Bank role does is it collects and plant genetic resources, it conserve, preserve the characteristics of crops and makes them available for future use. It collects and processes and conserves some germplasm, it characterizes and evaluates, and as well some regeneration of it. And what we do a lot is about documentation and information. But as I mentioned, we have been quite limited in resources. So recently started some germplasm distribution to the interested farmers, but actually this is on a small scale. So we carried out 55 surveys and some structured interviews. We started with closed and open-ended questions. We were a group actually, and as well participant observation took place the whole time in the region. And what we wanted to show that was a holistic approach of the data. And we used as well the livelihood framework in order to understand where the role of the gene bank could be and how we can interfere in the future. So some of the results regarding the farm size is that the farmers, so the smallholders, cultivated on small parcels of land. They were totally dependent on agriculture production, and the farms are quite fragmentized. And we could see that out of some of 55 farms interview and survey that we carried out, only one of them had 5 hectares. So it's quite fragmentized, and this leads to low productivity. And regarding the farming production, what we saw was self-consumed in the household, but because of some local policies in those zones, it's promoted agritourism, but it's on a small scale, as I said. What we could see was regarding the farm production. They were quite good adapted to the local conditions. And what I would say is that farmers in these regions are quite I might say stubborn, because they trust the local varieties, which they conserve for more than 100 years. They produce for household self-subsistence. And due to that, the agricultural productivity is low, but still farmers prefer and continue to use local varieties rather than the improved varieties. And somehow they had this issue of lack of trust to the new hybrid varieties, although you are quite preserving the same varieties as they use in those regions. And another issue was that there is a little cooperation of farmers in those regions because of bad historical cooperation, because we were quite a communist and severe country before 30 years. Another issue is that throughout these 10 years, I haven't been in Albania actually, so I recently came here. There have been a long process where farmers felt that they were quite excluded to grants or to subsidies that the agriculture ministry is providing because of lack of registered farms, lack of knowledge to fill out some various forms in order to receive those grants and subsidies. So whatever is done is via some financial aids that householdsmen could grab here or there and just started to promote the agritourism. So there have been given subsidies and grants, but the problem was that this was given to medium and big farmers and not to smallholders, or the ones they got something from this aid, I would say, was like very few. So we wanted to see how the role of the Gene Bank was in the whole process and how we could improve and increase the rural incomes for the smallholders. So we gave to them improved native adapted seeds. We gave some technology aspects for improving farmers' livelihood. And by doing so, we preserved the agro-biodiversity of the local Albanian seeds and combining it with some adapted local varieties that could enhance and foster the rural development, and as well to mitigate the process of how they felt excluded. Here are some just pictures that have been carried out. So just a few of the Alps and the group of the researchers and farmers, and then some squash, some peppers that are typically of the zones. It's eggplants, and here in the, it's just a picture where we have our soils in Tirana, near the Agriculture University. So what we recommended was that we should have a close relation between the Gene Bank, the Agriculture University of Tirana, and the local government, and to enhance project with the local government due to lack of resources, as I'm mentioning. And the agriculture policies should be revised in accordance to the key actors which are included in this process. So that's it.
Thanks a lot, Annika. Thanks a lot for giving us this very nice final presentation for today's session. We still have a bit of time actually also to discuss. So
okay, great. Maybe I was like too.
Don't worry, all good. Thanks a lot. I mean, this is very impressive actually, and I believe it's also quite tough work as well. So I believe you've just started these projects. But are you already seeing, say, any kinds in changing behavior of these farmers?
Actually, so, as I said, they are a bit stubborn. They're stubborn people. I mean, I think that it's not all of them behave the same. So this is through the participant observation that we were, and mainly we talk to the householdsmen, because the women are, I mean, they're kind of a bit shy and they don't interfere too much in those interviews and on the surveys that we carried out. But I see some hope, and that's why I wanted to say that we would like to really give something to those farmers, because we really do the same job as they are doing. They're doing it in the farms and we are doing it like in the research scale. But of course, that to have and to enhance this collaboration would be great. I mean, we would like to go there and to follow up. We are not quite sure if we will find the resources again. That's a problem. And I think it's everywhere in the transition and emerging countries.
Yeah, but nonetheless, very impressive that you're doing this kind of work. We got a question here from Leonard, who's asking actually, because you also mentioned this, these local varieties or autochthonous seeds, they may not have yield like the modern hybrid varieties.
Yeah.
So is there also the goal to convince the farmers to also plant some of these hybrid varieties in addition, maybe?
Yeah, actually, like the ones who are involved in the agritourism, they were fine with that. But the ones who were really like of subsistence, they were, oh no, we don't want to try it. And you know, we have the same varieties in our gene bank that they produce there in the farms, but it's kind of changing the mentality, which is quite difficult.
Yeah,
you know.
So it's really also about maybe those guys in tourism have been in contact with more people from other regions.
Exactly. Which I think that there are some Germans projects over there and French as well, but we really do hope to have some new cooperations.
Okay, and what would you be, maybe as a final question to your talk, to also have some time maybe for the others if there are more questions.
Yeah.
What is your recommendation maybe now to other places or to other agencies, also maybe in developing countries, to get into farmers with these kind of gene bank initiatives? So what have you learned?
I mean, I have been part of this institute for a year now, and I've been proposing a lot of things. I've been in Denmark for 10 years and in France as well. So I came with a very different mindset, and I would say that also just to talk to professors is difficult, you know, because we have very good ideas and new ideas. It's just that, as I said, too much maybe. It's the resources, it's the financial resources. And that's why it's difficult. And what I wanted to say about development projects going to transition and emerging countries, myself, I've been working in East Africa for 5 years, 6 years. It has been the same, you know, you go there, you talk to people, but I think that as an outsider, you feel a bit strange. I think that first you should work with some people at the universities who have knowledge about the regions, you know, because NGOs or other organizations, because they don't want to talk to locals, maybe like to local professors at the university because of, I don't know, development aid, somehow it's not perceived well by some people and by some others very good ones. So we have different opinions, even here.
Yeah. No,
but I mean, to really work closely to the universities. This is what I would recommend, like with people who are knowledgeable.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. I think I would also like to broaden the discussion here once more. Maybe there's also some more questions from our listeners also to the talks before. So if you still have questions also to the other presentations, this is the time now to give them. Of course, you're also welcome to directly contact all our speakers directly. You can find them also on the Woover app. You can directly send them a message to have a virtual coffee together or a follow-up, maybe also some ideas for follow-up projects. So if there's any kind of additional discussion, I think this would be welcome by all of our speakers. Okay, so I'm having a look on the Woover app. I don't see anything showing up right now, but we are still a bit around. And in the meantime, I got one more question. Yeah, it's a cool question again from Leonard. Also related to your presentation, Annika, once more.
Yeah, let me see. Is the code?
Because it's about a mountainous region, and
yeah.
Very difficult to farm there conventionally.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Related to fauna, to old land races and goats and pigs, I think that, I mean, this is a mixed zone with Muslims a lot, which do not consume pigs. But of course, there are Catholics because we are quite, and they really do. But as I said, people are like farmers are poor. They're quite poor. I've been there. So they are changing mentalities. But it's hard. It's really hard to talk to them because they see you as an outsider, as I mentioned. Also, people coming from the universities, because they say, okay, you have a salary over there. I mean, we're just for self-subsistence, right? So it was hard. It was quite hard to even to talk to some of them. But we managed to have 55 surveys and some structured interviews in those areas. But as I said, there has been done a lot via projects, and now the government as well is going there and is influencing everything via grants and subsidies. So we really do hope that things change for better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Annika. Okay, well, thank you all also for the very nice contributions. So I believe all of you will also have a look from time to time into our session Q&A for any follow-up questions that may arise. And as I said, there's also always the contact option to contact everybody directly. So yeah, personally, I enjoyed this session quite a lot. It was very cool. I also very much like the diversity of talks. Yeah, just like agricultural systems are diverse, also scientific expertise and disciplines, of course, are also very diverse. And I think this nicely showed up in our presentations today. Before closing, I would like to announce once more, there's also a poster session on agrobiodiversity today or tonight at 6 o'clock here in Germany. So in about 1.5 hours time. And we also have lots of very nice poster presentations coming up. You can already have a look at the abstracts on the Tropentag webpage right now. But of course, also there will be short presentations by these posters, and also the presenters will also be there to answer your questions as well. So I'm looking forward to see you later today. Let's grab a bit of a coffee, and I wish all of you a very nice end and continuation of this conference. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to you. Bye.